the minority ranking member, Ms. Mace, for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have a few questions that I would like to get through, so I'm just going to ask our participants just to try to keep it as brief so I can ask as many questions as I can. My first question I'd like to direct to Normal Paul Arminato, if you don't mind. There have been some discussion today about taking into consideration some of the issues when it comes to packaging. And so if you could just speak to the importance of legislation that's responsible, maybe at the federal level, looking at how we can prohibit the marketing and advertising to kids, either in labeling or packaging, what that would look like and the importance of that responsibility.
Thank you. As you well know, right now, those sort of decisions with regard to regulations on marketing and packaging, labeling, even testing, are a patchwork system. They're regulated by the individual states. So you will have some states that may have greater regulations or other states with lesser regulations. We would like to see uniform regulations when it comes to a number of these matters, such as labeling, such as testing, such as packaging, very similar to what we have right now with regard to alcohol.
Thank you. My next question goes to Mr. Gopals. I know that today already we've talked about some of the increases, major increases in drug overdoses, fentanyl, heroin, opioids, et cetera, be those examples. But can you tell us today, just exactly, every year since 2017, basically, what has been the leading cause of overdose deaths in terms of drugs, and how many deaths have been, how many deaths have there been from marijuana overdoses?
So I don't believe the CDC, DEA, NIDA, or any other federal agency has ever directly associated a fatal overdose with cannabis.
So that means zero, right?
Zero, yes.
Overdose deaths related to cannabis.
According to the federal government, yes.
Yeah, and I would agree. Thank you. And then Ms. Littlejohn, and thank you. Love Gaffney, the Gaffney Peach. But can you talk to us a little bit about, I guess, in terms of commerce, how do we ensure that consumers know what they're buying and ingesting? We've talked and heard a little bit about labeling, concentration, potency. Some thoughts on the importance of having some consistency there.
Well, the first step is legalizing and creating a framework where there are standards. And so every state that has legalized cannabis has strict packaging and labeling requirements. And the primary purpose of these marketing and labeling requirements is to protect the public and keep these products out of the hands of children. And so the legalization process provides a mechanism for us to call upon the extensive experience that we have both through TTB and other agencies in really creating policies that can not impede commerce while still keeping the public safe.
Thank you. Ms. Snyder, I have a question for you this morning as well. The opioid crisis, huge crisis. We've heard about some of that this morning. Some of the studies that I've read, including in the Journal of American Medicine right here, that I'm going to hold up and ask that we enter into the record by unanimous consent momentarily. But what I've read, where there's one dispensary in a state that stood up, that opioid addiction and morbidity could be decreased by upwards of almost 20% in the states where it was studied over a decade ago. So could you just speak to a little bit about the opioid crisis, the role of cannabis in preventing some of those deaths and addiction via cannabis?
Yes. Good morning, Congresswoman. Thank you for the question. So as you said, in states in which they have opened at least one dispensary, you have seen a substantial decrease in opioid-related deaths. And recent studies have shown that opioid-related hospital visits additionally have subsided substantially in jurisdictions in which recreational and medicinal cannabis have been legalized.
Great. And then my last question, we'll go back to Ms. Littlejohn this morning. Cartels and drugs, they're making billions of dollars every year. Some of your thoughts on how we can reduce the proclivity for illicit markets continuing in the United States, the importance of reducing that, maybe by lower taxes or by regulations and greater accessibility to higher quality cannabis for folks. But can you speak to the best ways that the federal government can ensure that we crush the illicit market?
The two biggest factors perpetuating the illicit the unregulated or unlicensed market are high federal taxes, high taxes, and the lack of interstate commerce. Because the unregulated market has both. Our country is flooded with cannabis from the West Coast. And so allowing individuals and legal companies to compete in that environment and to compete with tax rates that are actually reasonable is critical to their continued existence.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would like to request unanimous consent to enter in this article that appeared in the Journal of American Medicine that talked about the rate and reduction of opioid overdoses, mortality, and addiction with cannabis. Into the record.
Without objection. Thank you for your questioning, and I will now come to the distinguished gentlelady